You're tuned to 1520 WCHE Radio, and it's time now for the Avid Reader Show with your host, Sam Hankin. Sam will offer reviews and interviews of some of the more interesting books and authors of today. And now, Sam Hankin.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to another edition of The Avid Reader, brought to you by Wellington Square Bookshop, my bookstore, one of the last independent bookshops in the area. Today, what we have as our guest Mary Roach, who's the author of Stiff, Spook, Bonk, and lastly, and just published this month, Gulp, Adventures on the Alimentary Canal. Stiff is kind of a book about bodies that are dead. Spook is a kind of a book about the soul of bodies that are gone. Bonk is about sex. And Gulp is about what happens from the time we taste something till the time it exits our body. So welcome, Mary. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me on.
So it's nice to have books that have one-word titles. Do you do that on purpose?
It just started out that way. Stiff was a title that I always had planned to change. It was just on the book proposal, and we never came up with a better one. I think I suggested a bunch that my editor didn't like. Same with all of my books. We go back and forth, and then we end up with the one that's on the book proposal. So they're all the ones that I started out with, and it wasn't a game plan. I think one-word titles are certainly easier to remember. They have that going for them, but obviously, Packing for Mars.
Yeah, which I forgot to mention.
Words.
Yeah, Packing for Mars, which is about the possibility then when you wrote it about us going to Mars and what would happen during the 2 years that we traveled there, how we would exist or make it there. It's funny because I looked up and I remember books I've read that have one word, like Lolita, 1984, Heidi.
Heidi!
Well, I'm sorry.
I haven't thought about Heidi in a long time.
Remember that movie? Remember they interrupted the Super Bowl in the last 2 minutes by playing Heidi? Do you remember that? The uproar?
No, what? They interrupted the Super Bowl?
It was back in the day, and the Super Bowl was playing, and then time was up, and so the last 2 minutes, it was a really close game, and they interrupted the game to start playing Heidi, and there was like this outrage throughout the country. It was before people knew what television meant, what it meant to people who were, engrossed in it.
Well, and they couldn't have mixed two more disparate audiences than they.
Not unless she was
Super Bowl and
not unless she was wearing a helmet at the opening credits.
Well, she had those big thick braids all curled up.
That's true. I was in love with Heidi. I was at the Philadelphia Library the other night and watched you there with the whatever you want to call her, executive director of the Mütter Museum.
Oh, the curator, yeah.
Yeah, the curator, yeah. So that was great. And the only thing I would say is she was very nice and she's really, really funny, but I kind of wanted you to talk more than she did, which wasn't what happened.
Yeah. She's very enthusiastic. And
yes.
She also just knows so much, it comes bubbling out all the time.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the Mütter Museum and the megacolon and what a megacolon is and tied in with Elvis.
Sure, yeah. Well, a megacolon is an unfortunate state of affairs. It's something that happens when you have a condition such as Hirschsprung's, where you don't have nerves or genetic. It's a genetic lack of nerves on a stretch of the colon down toward the far end, and therefore material in the colon doesn't get moved along as it normally would. It tends to back up, and the colon stretches out and is damaged even more, and then you have a lot of difficulty with constipation. And in the extremes, the megacolon at the Mütter Museum is 28 inches around. I mean, that's the size pants I buy. 28 inches around. And it starts to push other organs around, and it also becomes very, very, it's very difficult to empty your colon. So people, including the guy who owns the 28-inch megacolon, have died on the toilet trying to, straining its stool is the medical way that they say it, which can end up, if you push really hard, and an unfortunate sequence of events happens that can end with a heart arrhythmia and death. So,
yeah, you talked about that.
Elvis Presley also had a megacolon. His was not nearly as big. It was about three times normal size around in diameter. So he struggled with constipation, and his doctor's belief is that that's how he died, and it would appear from the autopsy and the description of his colon that he had Hirschsprungs. I mean, he wasn't, nobody diagnosed him, and it's unfortunate because he could have had surgery. You can remove that section of the parallel section of someone's colon. He also did. He took a lot of drugs, which don't help the problem. Obviously, you're slowing down gut motility when you take painkillers, and antidepressants and any number of other drugs affect how quickly things move through you. So that didn't help at all, and he also had a weakened heart. So it was kind of a perfect storm of medical woes that all coalesced there in the bathroom at Graceland.
Yeah, and it's funny because at the Mütter Museum, the colon kind of takes prime position in the entire museum. It's like in a teleportation chamber. I remember. I remember.
It's like the Mona Lisa.
Yeah, exactly. Or like Edward Munch's The Scream, which is at the Philadelphia Museum. No, it's in New York. I took my kids to the Mütter Museum when they were little, and I wasn't sure, should I really take them there or not? Like the wax lady there and all. And they were scared to death of that colon.
You see it at a distance, and it looks like a monitor lizard or something. It doesn't read as a colon at all. First of all, it's brown and very dry, and it's in need of repair. It's a very old specimen, but the way it's in one of those beautiful old wood and glass museum cases that you see at an old natural history museum, and you almost think it's an animal. It doesn't look like a part of anybody. It's a frightening specimen.
Yeah, it's like what you're talking about. You don't have any point of reference. It's like what you're talking about in Gulp about people either say yum or yuck. It's like when you see that colon, you don't have any reference in your mind as to what could this possibly be. It doesn't look like anything I've ever seen,
Exactly. Yeah, you have to walk right up to it, and then also you see the photographs of the guy. There's photographs of J.W., the guy who owned it, the megacolon, and you see what he looked like with that inside him, and it's unbelievably.
Oh yeah, there were
horrific.
Yeah, he had 42 pounds of.
He looks like Humpty Dumpty. He has these little skinny legs and this huge torso.
Did you ever read, maybe you even know her, there's a woman named Olivia Judson who wrote Dr. Tatiana's Sex Advice to All Creation?
I've heard of it, but I haven't read it, unfortunately. Let
me just read you one little paragraph because it sounds exactly like you. It's, here's the little squib on it. Do your genitals explode? Are you 200,000 times smaller than your mate? Do you drug your lover with a potion that keeps her faithful? Explores the science of sex, considering everything from why females of so many species are so promiscuous to why sex exists at all. Doesn't that sound like you? Doesn't it sound a little bit like Bonk?
It sounds like me with a better background. She's probably a biologist or an MD. I don't know what her background is, but I've heard that the book is wonderful.
It really is. It's a great book. It was, it's funny when I've always thought about this when at the talk the other day at the library, and afterwards I was standing right next to you, but I didn't get in line, and I saw it was a really long line, and there was this one guy. He was tall, had a mustache, but he was talking to you for 5 minutes, and then all this.
Yeah.
People, do you remember him?
Was he? Did he want me to sign the book?
Yes. Yes.
Something or other. Here's to Dr. Poop or something.
Yes. That was him.
Dave. I think his name was Dave. Yeah, I do remember him.
Yeah, he looked like someone out of a 1930s movie, I thought.
Yeah, and he said he's the one who had coprolites. And he said he's going to send me a coprolite.
I would love to have one of those.
And I'm very excited about that. But then I thought later, wow, should I have given that guy my address?
No, I don't think so. Really, honestly. But then I wonder, how do you keep those people moving along? You had someone next to you, but I would think the people behind were getting pissed off. That's just my take on it.
Well, I talk to everybody, so some people end up taking up a little more time, but I talk to everybody for a couple of minutes who wants to talk. I think if you wait online, that's kind of what you're waiting for.
Yeah, it's not.
Nobody really cares about a signature.
No, it's really nice that you do that. It would be hard for me to do that.
Well, yeah, it's you're a little drained at the end of the evening. That's for sure. But,
well, think about it.
But my readers are all very cool. I mean, he was a little bit unusual, but they're for the most part just really fun, smart people, funny people.
Shouldn't he have just brought the coprolite with him? Just put it in his pocket? A lot easier.
Yeah, but I don't know how big a piece of dinosaur is. Maybe he needs a forklift. I don't know.
Oh, yeah, or maybe it wouldn't have gotten through security. It was.
I don't know. It hasn't. I haven't gone home yet, so hopefully I'll have some dinosaur waiting for me.
I got to keep. I'm putting these seconds down because I think I have to take out that word.
You what?
I think I have to take the word out of the radio broadcast that you just.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all right. Oh yeah, okay. What was I going to tell you? Oh yeah, remember when you talk about how the things that are inside of us are fine while they're inside of us, but then when we spit them out or poop them out, and then they're horrible and disgusting?
Yeah.
Well, I remember this episode of Seinfeld, and he was dating this really beautiful girl who had beautiful hair, but then when she took a shower at his house, and then her hair was in the drain, her beautiful luxuriant hair became totally disgusting.
So, Seinfeld, yeah. I don't remember. I must have seen that episode, but there was also the one where maybe it was the same woman, but she liked to walk around.
Oh yeah,
naked, and also when she coughed, she made an unattractive expression, and I guess he didn't like her sitting on the furniture, naked.
Yeah. Well, he's so...
There's a lot of neurotic body issues.
Right, like the girlfriend who had the man hands?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, so when you what is it that, like, okay, so you've written now about cadavers, dead bodies, what happens to them after they die. Where's the first little spark that comes to your head? Because you do so much research. And, you got to be thinking while you're doing the research, is this going to really work or am I going to have to abandon this? What's the first spark that comes into your head that you decide you want to talk about what happens to our body when we put something in our mouth?
Oh, I think the first spark, there's a collection of stuff that's piling up in the back of my head over the years. In the case of this book, like there was a trip, the original trip to Beano, which was something I did for a magazine, Beano being anti-flatulent pills, and I wasn't able to use a lot of the material for that piece because my editor wanted just sort of a nuts and bolts, kind of be less gassy, which really I can't stand. I mean, so that was I had this. I would love. I wanted to tell that story at some point, and also I came across some things on the packing when working on Packing for Mars, which is really a book about the challenges of living without gravity and showers and all the things we need to be human. And so the zero gravity toilet chapter, I really took the topic to new levels and had a blast with it. So it was that plus a conversation with a reader who's an MD, conversation about the human anus. So those...
I do that every day.
Yeah, it's kind of a usual day in the life of Mary Roach.
Maybe that's why I have no friends.
There was a combination of those things, and also the trip up to the Arctic, the Inuit food. Mm-hmm. But there were a bunch of things vaguely related that I thought, I can string these all together in a book about eating. Digesting and swallowing and excreting. So it was really just a collection of small sparks.
It's funny, I'm totally immune to Beano, but luckily I don't have a problem with gas, but my entire family does, which is disconcerting at Thanksgiving and such. But but my brother, who fashions himself as a Buddhist, he goes on these, retreats, silent retreats for like a month. But he has this problem. I don't know if that violates the code of silence, but he always takes Beano with him to avoid that because they eat a diet of legumes,
Yeah. Oh, I wonder if that would violate the code of silence. I kind of doubt it. I think Buddhism embraces all of that.
Yeah, the way I look at Buddhism, it embraces things so much that I don't have to go on retreats or meditate. You know, it's like...
I think that's a good way to look at it.
Nothing happens. It's fine. You don't have to... there's no should. I should be meditating now. Nope, not. Okay, it's fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
Do you ever wonder, you talk about how the things you write about have to be humorous, have to be scientific, and maybe have to be a little gross. Yet, did any of this start because your last name kind of fills all three of those characteristics? Or did you ever think of that?
Roach, no. You get so used to your last name.
Yeah, but you have a cockroach on your webpage.
Yeah, right. But I don't. No, but I don't think so. I finally did Fresh Air after all these years, and a friend of mine, I had a bet that at some point, if Terry Gross said something that would open the door for this, that I was going to go, Terry Gross. Like, Terry Gross. And she did say something, which it didn't make it into the interview. But when I said that, she went, "Oh, I guess I have an odd name too."
You think that's the first time? You think that's the first time she heard it? Jeez, it must have dogged her in her school days. But
yeah.
Do you ever think that your humor, which is great, your footnotes, which are hilarious, do you ever think that overpowers the science in your books, or do you care, or which one are you looking for the most? To gross out the reader, which you, like you say, you stop at a certain point, to present the science so that we know something we didn't know before, or to make the reader laugh, or is it like an ad?
Oh, I want a smorgasbord of all of them.
Okay.
If that's possible, that's what I want.
Yeah, I think you kind of have equal parts of all three, and also the idea of curiosity. Like everyone who reads your books, they didn't know a lot of this stuff before, just as you did.
Right.
Like in the tasting labs.
Right.
And I think that's, everyone in my bookstore, all the people who work there, they're going, I can't wait to read her book. I can't wait to read her book. And it's not necessarily because you're a great author, which you are. It's because they're curious, because they can tell by the title, which is cool about the one-word titles. They can tell what it's about, and they're going, I can't wait to read this because I know I'm going to find out all kinds of funny, cool things I didn't know before.
Yeah, good. That's what I hoped for sure.
Well, and along those lines, why don't we talk a little bit about fecal transplants, because I found that very interesting at the talk at the library.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah. They're.
But don't use that word again.
No, I won't. Don't worry. Fecal transplants. Just to sort of sum it up for people who aren't familiar, it's a treatment, a very effective treatment for a chronic bacterial infection in the colon, and it's about 90-something% effective, which is great. This infection, the bacteria is C. difficile. It kills 30,000 people a year.
My mother has it.
She has it now?
Yeah, and it's not her fault. She had it she's 90 years old. She had like a sports injury, like an ACL, so they did a knee transplant. And then when she went to the rehab place, it was not as clean as it should have been, and that's where she got it. And that hurt her more than anything, especially now that she can't take certain antibiotics. I thought about that when you were talking about it. Yeah,
it responds to antibiotics, but sometimes it doesn't.
Right.
And people in whom it doesn't respond, and it just sort of sets up housekeeping in there, and it's miserable. You have diarrhea all the time. You can't, you lose weight, and it can be fatal. And the fecal transplant is just what it sounds like. You take a donor's contributions, as we say, and it can be done in a number of ways. When I thought it was just done very simply with a blender and some water, and it was installed. You give the person antibiotics to wipe out everything that to sort of get a clean slate, and then they put the healthy person's fecal material in, and within days the infection is gone. So, what's been interesting in the 2 years that I was writing this book, when I first started out, people were horrified by this idea. They couldn't believe it was real. It seemed like some weird fringe thing. but now there's been a lot of media attention, because it is very attention-getting, this topic. People are completely accepting of it. Oh yeah, I heard about that fecal transplant. That's interesting. So the taboo surrounding it has kind of fallen away, which is great, because people can now, people like your mom or whoever is suffering can feel more comfortable, like, coming forward and asking about it. And hey, do you think I could try this? So, but it's also interesting. It's been so slow to find its way into the healthcare system. There's no code to
right. And
billing.
as you said, no one can make any money off of it. You don't have to do anything.
Right. There's no pharmaceutical company who's profiting off the material, because that's just going to be flushed down the toilet otherwise. So there's no device maker. There's no one who's funding the trials for FDA approval or any other of the many kind of hoops that you have to jump through to get something into the standardized healthcare.
Yeah, the only way they could do it would be like to somehow powder it and put it in a tablet and call it like beneficia or something like that. Yeah, exactly. And then there's a question of how much of it do you need? I mean, they use it. It's not like a teaspoon. It's a whole. Really?
Yeah, it's like a coffee cup.
Really?
Full. Yes, it's not a small amount. You're talking about, you really want to overwhelm everything that's in there and replace the microbiome of one person with someone else's. So a pill is not likely to do the trick. I mean, you can also, I've heard you can go through the mouth with an endoscope all the way, but I guess you have to go through the stomach and into the, it seems like a circuit, sort of like going to Japan via Europe. But
or through the center of the earth.
It's what?
Or through the center of the earth.
Yeah, exactly. So there will be. They ultimately they'll find a way to process the material without killing the bacteria. Because the problem, they're you're dealing with these delicate creatures that live in a very specific environment, and if you take them out, process them, and make a pill, are you going to end up killing a lot of them? So, and no one knows which ones you need and whether those particular bacteria can survive very long outside the gut. So they do it quickly. It's like, take it out, put it in someone else.
Well, what was really interesting was the way the moderator and you at the library were talking about, it's the people who don't ever think about anything about their digestive tract, or how can you explain it? You can explain it better than me.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I asked Dr. Korutz, who's the guy who's been doing a lot of work toward getting approval of the process. I said, who do you use as a donor? How do you screen them? And he said, we don't really have a screening. We just make sure they don't have any infectious diseases. And then the only other qualification is that we want somebody who doesn't think about their intestinal tract. That's the sign of everything's A-okay. When you've got somebody who spends a lot of time dealing with symptoms or discomfort, or that's not the person whose intestinal flora you want. You want the person who goes through life unaware that they even have an intestine or a colon. So that's what they're looking for. So I don't know if they just sort of ask, how often do you think about your colon?
I don't often think about it, and generally it's not, I wake up 9 a.m., that's it. Next day, 9 a.m., that's it. But unfortunately, when I was reading your book, a good portion of it I read at this new taco place called Taco Maya, and I got this giant burrito, and then I felt like I was pretending like I was a restaurant critic. I was saying, okay, it's a new restaurant. Let's just pretend I'm a restaurant. So I got everything. So I got the flan, and then they had this bread pudding, and I got all that. And then it was like, I was thinking, this is perfect. I'm reading exactly what's happening to me.
Yeah. Yeah, you don't want to do that.
I'm not going back there. I told them their food was excellent, but I'm not going back. I shouldn't say that.
Yeah.
No, Taco Maya is a great place. They're like 20 minutes from where I'm sitting right now. Your book, Bonk, I remember there's this book by John Barth, and I think it's called The End of the Road. And this guy in it, he looks at sex kind of, basically like insert tab A into slot B, and but he thinks the idea of these human beings doing this coupling, he thinks it's so funny that whenever he tries to actually have intercourse with a woman, he just starts laughing uncontrollably, which obviously limits his ability to find partners. And there's a part of me that, don't you think that it's really silly in a lot of ways?
What's silly, sex or that guy?
Well, he's silly, but no, I mean the idea of how it occurs, and you talk about it, but just the idea of natural...
Of what people are doing?
Yeah, the physical, actually the physical...
Yeah. If you stop and really think about it, it's surreal. It's really bizarre.
Yeah.
That people do that. I know, and very very National Geographic Channel.
Well, it's funny because you talk about okay, so you wouldn't want to walk into a room. You would not walk into a room where someone was having sex with somebody else because it's a big taboo. But you also talk in your book about how it's almost like a taboo if you sat there watching someone creating this bolus in their mouth, right? I mean, we don't do that. We don't look at people.
Yeah, no. Yeah, there was the guy at NASA TV who said, the guy who usually for long stretches of time, NASA TV is just focused on mission control.
Right.
Even when there's nothing really going on, there's no launch, but they'll just have the cameras on. And if they see somebody start to unwrap a sandwich to eat lunch, they'll just quietly move the camera because it's kind of you're just sort of this sad, lonely animal filling up. When you're eating. If you take it out of the context of a restaurant where you're all distracted by the conviviality and the people around you and the atmosphere and all those other things that distract you from the fact that it's a filling station, really.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and on the subway, like people in Japan, if you eat on the subway, people look at you, they're just like horrified, like you're some sort of freak. It's like disgusting that you would do that. And, of course, then I do because, I don't care. I'm hungry. And, but I did. I felt like people were just looking at me like, what is she? And they'll also when in some cultures it's just like you pick your teeth, so you put your hand over your face while you're using the toothpick, like you don't want people to see this horror show going on in your mouth.
I read this science fiction story once where the idea of watching someone eat was such a taboo that it titillated them just as sex would titillate you, or there'd be pornography about people eating. So you'd actually have...
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because
yeah.
You could just easily flip it. It's just as silly a thing.
Yeah, for sure. It's funny that we do it. We all go out and do it in public, and you never really stop. You're always just listening to what people are saying, and you're looking them in the eye. You're never really focusing on them chewing.
No.
And you just sort of automatically blot that out of the picture.
Yeah, it's funny. I never really thought about that. But if you have like a big dinner party, everyone's always talking to each other. When are they eating? It's like they don't eat in silence. You just have this conversation, but you don't really look at them cutting the meat.
There's a disorder that somebody wrote about in the New York Times not that long ago, where people are revolted and disturbed by the sound of people chewing. It has a name, this disorder. I don't know the name of it. But there are people who are extremely disturbed and upset by the sound of people eating.
My son was like that and I felt so sorry. When he was little and my daughter was 2 years younger than him, whenever she would eat in the car, he would say, "Stop chewing. It's disgusting." And my stepdaughter is a little that way too. Yeah. Luckily, my son never listens to my broadcast, so I don't have to worry about him hearing this. No one in my family does.
No one in my family reads my books. That's not true. Some of them do.
Do they comment? Is your mom still around?
My mom?
Yeah.
No, my mom's dead.
Oh. Well, who? So do you have brothers and sisters?
I have a brother. Yeah.
So does he read and critique your books and tell you about them? Why didn't you put this in? Or I liked it? Or
he he reads them, but he's a big fan. He'll tell me which ones are his favorites, but he doesn't offer a critique or anything. Actually, this late Gulp is dedicated in part to him.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
The other thing that you talked about at the library was about spitting and how in different cultures spitting has different connotations as well, correct?
Yes, in most cultures it's a curse. It's something disparaging, or it's a negative thing. But in the Greeks have a whole tradition of it's sort of a blessing. Like you don't actually launch a gob at anybody. You're not
right
really spitting. You're just making the kind of like as though you were spitting. But it is a blessing. Like you spit on a bride. You spit on not with any saliva coming out of the mouth. Someone told me that traces back to saliva being a blessing comes from the Gospels, and I forget whether it was Mark or which one of those dudes it was, but comes from a telling of when Jesus healed the eyes of a blind man by rubbing his saliva on his eyelids, and that was supposedly the origin. And saliva used to be used, I believe, that in the baptism rite. I think I'd have to. I haven't looked at that chapter in a while, but I think that the priests. I think it was the priests' saliva was used. I mean, it isn't now, but it was a tradition.
Well, I see that the new Pope Francis, has been kissing people's feet. He probably shouldn't go there with the saliva. That might be too much for the media, I think.
Yeah.
But kissing
it's
feet.
Tough enough as a new pope.
Yeah, I know.
You got to play it safe.
It's hard to in that. Anyway, so yeah, saliva. The other thing that's really interesting, and you talked about, was how smelly it gets. Why is that?
Well, if you leave it at room temperature, anything with bacteria in it, if you leave it or incubate it in particular, if you have it in a nice warm place where this bacteria can sit there and just do their thing, you get smelly breakdown odors. Also, it depends on, I guess, whether the person has just eaten, if there's material for the bacteria to be breaking down, and anyway, that's what it is. It's just a decomposition odor.
Oh yeah, and the other funny thing you said was how the things we eat are also the things we spill on our, in your case, skirt, and why detergents, the enzymatic action of detergents, replicates to a certain extent the contents of your saliva, right?
Yeah, the laundry detergent's kind of a digestive tract in a box. It's got 3 different digestive enzymes for breaking down fats, starches, proteins. So I when I dribble something on my shirt, I dab some spit on it, especially if no one's around. I mean, I don't actually spit. I use my finger, but I believe it. I mean, I haven't tested it. I don't know if it's really true, but it seems to me to work better than whatever people often say to use carbonated water. But I don't think that helps at all.
My mother used to clean my. You know how mothers do that? They lick a napkin. Or she used to clean my face that way too. That was kind of gross.
Well, yeah, in a pinch.
Yeah,
and it makes sense given that what you're spilling on yourself is the same stuff you're eating, by and large.
True. Well, that's goes back to what you were saying about things that come out of you all of a sudden become horrible when inside of you they're perfectly fine. It's just
they kind of define. You can see the exact boundary of the self by the point at which saliva becomes disgusting or chewed food. Like you can put it on your tongue and stick your tongue out, but your tongue is still considered part of the inside of you. So when you pull your tongue back in, you're not disgusted by it, even though it was outside the mouth. There was this psychologist who studied disgust who did a whole paper on the microanatomy of the self and where the boundaries are and where you start to feel disgusted by yourself, by your body products is what he called them, which I thought kind of makes them sound like something you get at a spa.
Well,
body products.
I see, product. There's all kinds of product. Yeah, I still disgust my nephews, though, by chewing up hamburger and then holding it on my tongue and sticking out my tongue. You can disgust other people easily. I do it all the time.
Yeah.
So what's next? What's the next one? The next book?
I don't know. I don't know what the next book is. I do not know.
Well, I assume it'll be about something about the human body, but maybe it won't be.
Well, I don't know. I may have used up the human body. Really, there's not a lot of terrain left. I mean, there are facets of you can look at the human body in different circumstances. Like packing for Mars was the human body in zero gravity and confined spaces and things. Trying circumstances like that. But as for just a kind of a portion of the body, I'm not sure. I don't think the heart or the brain is really roachable terrain.
Yeah, and you've kind of dealt with the mind. You could do with the mind, but it might not have as much humor as you want.
That's kind of down the rabbit hole for me. The mind, I don't know.
Yeah, well, that's the funny thing about life is that, people always say you're projecting or that's your opinion or you're being defensive. But the only thing you really have to use is this little 3 or 4 pound glob of wet stuff inside of your skull. And I always get upset.
Yeah.
My brother always says to me, you're projecting. Well, yeah, I'm projecting. Well, I have no choice. It's just what I do.
That's your experience of the world. That's where you get your information. Well, of course, your experience is how you see everything through the window of your own mind and experience.
That's where our arguments always end that way. Because once someone says you're being defensive, you have to be defensive. There's no choice.
Yeah, no, I'm not.
That's my first response. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's kind of funny. that might work. Okay. Well, anyway, thanks for taking so much time to talk to us today. And we have like 3 book clubs in the Bookshop, and very seldom do the people pick a nonfiction book, but they've done it twice now with yours. So.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, and maybe next time you're in Philadelphia, you can come out to our store. I think you would really like it a lot.
I would love to.
Okay.
That'd be great. I really love Philadelphia. It's a great city. Yeah,
it seems like you've been, you had said you'd been to the Mütter Museum and you've been to Philadelphia. I think one of the doctors you talk about in the book, maybe it was the Fecal guy. Who was it? It was in Philadelphia.
Oh, Paul Rosin is at UPenn.
Right.
Disgust researcher, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, well, thanks again.
All right, thank you. Thanks so much.
Okay.
I really appreciate it. All right, take care.
All right, bye. Thanks so much for listening. Tune in again next week when we'll have another interview with a top-selling author on the Avid Reader.
You've been listening to the Avid Reader Show with your host, Sam Hankin. Sam will be back next week with reviews and interviews of some of the more interesting books and authors of today.